Today in Luther's Kitchen we are making apple hand pies. So we're basically taking an apple pie and turning it into something we can pick up with our hand. So we're going to make a dough. This is a basic pie or crostata dough. So I'm starting out with 1.5 cups of all-purpose flour. We're putting in 2 tablespoons of sugar, half a teaspoon of kosher salt, and we're going to pulse that just to combine those dry ingredients together. Now into the food processor we are going to add our butter. So we have 10 tablespoons or 1 1/4 sticks of unsalted butter that has been cut into small cubes, and we have kept it really cold by putting it back in the freezer. It's really important that you're using super cold unsalted butter. And then we're going to pulse that again until we get large pea-sized flour covered butter crumbles. Then we're going to add some ice cold water. So put all the butter in, try not to touch it too much, and pulse. Now we're adding in 4 tablespoons or 1/4 cup of ice cold water. And then we're just going to pulse it until it forms a ball. You don't want to keep the machine on too long because the heat of the machine will melt the butter. So just let it roll until it starts to come together, and you'll see it come together right about now. See it all gathering into one side? You know the dough is ready to come out of the food processor. Now carefully remove it from the food processor and try to gather it into a ball. We're going to flatten it to make a very thick frisbee. We're going to keep it on a piece of parchment paper and let it chill for at least an hour before we attempt rolling it out. So get that covered with a piece of parchment paper after you've rolled it out. While the dough is chilling, we already peeled 3 Granny Smith apples, but you could use a mix, a couple Granny Smiths and a Fuji apple. That works well. You don't want to use an apple that's going to turn too mushy in the oven, so that's why Granny Smiths are preferred because they hold up well to high heat. So after you peel it, you want to thinly slice them, and you want to make sure you are removing the core. Caleb's doing it the difficult way. It's easier to kind of cut it out around the core and then thinly slice. But regardless, you want pieces that are 1/4 inch thick. 3 apples. Now, we're going to roll out that dough that has been chilling. We want to double it in size. And I end up with a large circle, which makes my pie shape a little awkward. But I'm trying to make sure that the dough is thin enough so that I don't have a super thick hand pie. So I'm going to take this circle and I'm going to cut it into fourths. And I'm going to use each of the fourths to make my hand pie. So I'm going to now roll each section, because that's still pretty thick, out so that it's thinner, and I'm going to try to attempt to get that triangle to look more like a circle shape before I put in my apple filling. So good luck with that. It's best to put another piece of parchment paper on top. That way it won't stick to the rolling pin or to the bottom. So that's pretty decent. Now I've got my apples that have been sliced. I'm adding to that a little bit of lemon juice. So I have about a tablespoon of freshly squeezed lemon juice. That just helps keep the apples from turning brown and yucky. I'm adding 1/4 cup of sugar. And I'm also going to put in a teaspoon of ground cinnamon, or you could use pumpkin pie spice. That would be lovely. So 1 teaspoon of ground cinnamon, and then I put in 2 teaspoons of cornstarch, and that just helps absorb the liquid so that it doesn't end up getting too soggy on the bottom of your pie crust. So 2 teaspoons of cornstarch, sprinkle it in, stir it all well so you don't have lumps. Now we're ready to start filling our pie. So each triangle is going to be rolled out to sort of a circle, and then you're going to put in 1/4 of the apple mixture, and you only want to put it to one side because you need the other side to be able to fold over. So get it all in there. You got to leave some room around the edge because you have to seal this. And I did make an egg wash with 1 egg and a splash of water, whisked it all together, and you're just going to brush one side, then bring the other dough side over, and just crimp it. Get a fork, use the tines of the fork to seal it together, and then you're going to transfer that to another baking sheet pan that has another clean piece of parchment paper. I'm also brushing the tops with the egg wash, and I'm going to sprinkle some sugar. If you have sanding sugar, great. If not, you can use regular sugar. Now, if you don't want to make your own pie dough, you can cheat and you can use puff pastry. So these are large sheets of puff pastry that I get from Smart & Final. They're wonderful because they don't have the folds in them. And I'm just thinning out each sheet. I'm only using one sheet. This is going to make 4 pies, but I'm thinning out the dough a bit before I cut it into fourths and then again further thin it out. So I want to make it the same size as a piece of parchment paper, 11 by 17. So I'm peeling that paper away. You could put a little bit of flour on the bottom of the parchment paper, because mine actually started to stick a little because my dough got a little too warm. I'm cutting this into fourths. Then I'm going to take each piece off. And again, putting a little flour on the bottom would have helped. So carefully peel it off. And then you could also put a little flour on your work surface before you set these down. I didn't, and mine actually stuck a little bit, so my life would have been easier had I sprinkled a little flour on the work surface. So peel those off, and then you're going to take one at a time, and you're going to add your apple filling. Using puff pastry is a lot quicker, obviously, than making your own dough. So we're taking, again, 1/4 of the apple mixture. We're putting it on one side only. And then this time I have an egg white that I had left over from another recipe. So I'm using egg white. And I'm brushing the egg white along the edge of one side only. Bring the other side over. Same concept. I'm going to crimp it. This time I'm going to end up with something that looks more like a rectangle than a half circle. But get it crimped really well. And you may want to do this on a piece of parchment paper just in case it sticks to the bottom, or again, sprinkle some flour on the bottom. And then we're going to carefully remove this from the counter with a spatula and get it on a baking sheet pan with a piece of parchment paper that's ready for it. And a while ago, you should have preheated the oven to about 400 degrees. So now I'm finishing brushing the tops of these. These have the puff pastry. With the egg white, I'm sprinkling all of them with sugar. And I'm going to cut 3 slits in each one so it vents, because this is going to puff up. And I put that in a hot oven for 30 minutes. And I have something flaky and delicious. And you can keep these in a covered container for about a day. For this recipe and more, please visit myclasscancook.com.